I'm sure you'll grab that in if you want it in your spare time, you know.
That's the only honorary one.
Only, you know what? Actually, look, if you live your life to one day earn an honorary doctorate, you are doing something right.
That's what I'm aiming for.
I mean,
Yeah.
think about that though.
Yeah.
Like Harry Belafonte has a couple. I mean, no, I mean, serious
Yeah.
people I respect
Yeah.
are
Oh, for sure.
yeah, honored. So look at what you do in your life to do that. But brother, welcome to the School of Impact. I have the privilege and pleasure to have good brother Jonathan Beauford here. How do I pronounce your official title? Is it like equity lead at Google? Like, go ahead and do the whole professional introduction thing
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much covers it. I'm specifically the lead for equity at performance management at Google.
to it. Like, how'd you even get to where you are right now in equity and performance management? I mean,
I have no idea, really. I mean, yeah, I started in Brooklyn. I grew up in New
okay,
York most of my life. Yeah, about for the first 30 years of my life, we're in and out of New York. As you said, I spent 4 years in New Jersey for at Princeton, came right back to New York.
hmm
Um, I was interested in psychology and education in undergrad and African American studies. So that's when I really first dug into the space of inequality and
hmm
sociology, and just realizing like my path to even get to Princeton was the systems that influenced it.
mm,
In terms of, it wasn't necessarily an accident that equally talented peers of mine, didn't end up there, or ended up in a lot of different places in their lives,
hmm
not because of anything wrong with them. And
right,
so that was the initial entry point into education and inequality and equity. And then, yeah, most of my professional work started in education as well. So college counseling, then admissions, actually. I was an
okay,
admissions officer at NYU for 3 years. That was like my first full-time job after going to NYU for
wow, okay.
psychology, a master's in psychology. And then, yeah, back to New York, working there, and then went to business school in
Mm-hmm.
Yale in Connecticut. So still in the tri-state area. After
hmm
business school, came back to New York, went straight
hmm
into nonprofit management. I thought at first I'd go into consulting. I did a
Yeah.
summer internship at a consulting firm and while I was
hmm
in business school, and I ended up just not really liking it that much.
Yeah.
Um, so I was like, let me go straight back into nonprofit management, which is what the long-term goal was anyway. So
Right.
became director of a college access and success programs at a charter network there.
hmm
And that was kind of also my first foray into people management, like building teams and leading, and
Right.
really discovered that as a passion of mine, something I'm really good at.
hmm
Another way to invest and develop people. Outside of, before I had done a lot of, counseling or tutoring work, like working with individual students.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, did that for a while and then moved out to the West Coast because, climate change got too cold on the East
You
Coast.
got tired of the cold, right? Come on.
Oh man,
Or
it
the
was rough.
humidity in New York. Which one? Like, because that's the
Both.
worst.
There was no
Concrete
fall and no
humidity
spring.
is the worst.
It's like fall and spring disappeared over time. So there were no moderate seasons left in New York,
Yeah.
I felt like. So yeah, moved to California, to the Bay Area, and then that's where I started working college track.
Perfect climate 24/7.
It was, even that's changed. Like,
Wow. You mean you're up to 75 degrees now?
it's brutal.
Ew.
It's brutal.
It's not the cool 65 all day long
Yeah,
with the microclimate.
slightly uncomfortable.
Man. So did you access any of these programs? Are there any programs you want to shout out that really helped you?
Big shout out to MLT for sure. Um, Getting me into business school, getting me aware of business school,
Right.
figuring out what I wanted to do there, what I wanted to get from it. The network that supported me throughout and after. I just also finished up a subsequent MLT program for mid-career professionals for senior leadership pipeline.
Yeah. And that's
Um,
management leaders of tomorrow, right?
yes, exactly. So huge shout out to MLT. I think one of the most impactful programs I've been through throughout my career for sure.
John and Susan Rice found. I
Yep.
mean,
Yeah.
it,
Yeah. And it'll be
it's
that one mention, that
Mhm.
one conversation that, turns the trajectory. Like I know, like you said, Ivy Leagues were not on my radar. Princeton's the only one I applied to, and that's because they came and did some sort of like session at a place nearby, and my mom saw the flyer and was like, "Oh, we need to go to this thing, for colleges."
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I went with my friends there. We were all messing around in the in the session. I remember
Had
not
no
paying.
idea what kind of opportunity you were saying.
No, it was like UPenn. What the heck is that? Princeton. That's the school that Carlton wanted to go to on Fresh Prince. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, good
Yeah,
memory. Ooh, I
yeah.
forgot about
That was my reference
that.
point for it. And then yeah, afterwards it was
Yeah.
like, there's no way. My mom basically
Hmm.
forced me to apply, and my
Hmm.
guidance counselor, supported me in doing that. But
Hmm.
again, that was the only Ivy League school. I thought there was no way that I was getting in at all. And
Hmm.
so these little moments of like going to that session, my mom pushing me to apply. I submitted the application late, but I still submitted it, right?
Hmm.
Versus not. And yeah, when I got in, there was still another decision point of like, is this a place I want to go, or do I want to do something more comfortable for myself? So I
Hmm.
had some athletic and academic scholarships to local schools like St. John's and Queens. My brother had
Hmm.
went there. I went for like a accepted athlete weekend with my friend, and there's dope parties, and I was like,
Yeah.
this would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, when I went to the accepted students weekend at Princeton, it was like, this is something so different than what I'm used to. I'm uncomfortable here, and like
Hmm.
somehow in my 17-year-old body, I still had enough wisdom to be like, let me do the thing that's more uncomfortable for me.
Well,
And then,
let's talk about, I think culture has a bigger part to play and in our
mhm,
comfortability and what we think about as where we're comfortable. I just wanted you
100%.
to expound on your thoughts on that, your personal experience.
Yeah, I think I first learned that getting to Princeton, and it's been true throughout, where the no racial group is a monolith, right? And we can end up at the same places, but take very different paths and have very different cultures. And so I noticed some folks who looked like me at Princeton, or even now at places like Google, are able to thrive or navigate it differently based on their previous experiences, based on their culture. And so I felt that was one of the most surprising things to me. It was
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
even within the Black community, I felt like I was underprepared, or kind of like more less familiar with how to navigate this situation compared to folks who, for instance, who had went to private high schools, or went to boarding schools and prep schools, where it's they had some experience and exposure to that, or maybe their families were coming from
Hmm.
different financial circumstances, or had some of their parents, Black folks, who had gone to Princeton, and they
Hmm.
were legacy students and Black. So it's like these groups that we
Yep.
sometimes think are separate. There is also overlapping identities, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
which is why race is less of a indicator of need or acceptance than the family background, did their parents graduate from college? Did their, who went to high? All of those factors need to be taken into consideration because you have wealthy legacy Black people, just
Yeah,
like you have wealthy legacy white people.
yeah, exactly.
So,
I don't know. I have mixed feelings about the ruling, because being in admissions, I was obviously
Mhm.
already familiar with how a lot of the stuff worked outside of race. And I don't know how, honestly, and maybe it could differ from schools. I don't know how impactful these affirmative action policies were to begin with, honestly.
Right,
I'm
right,
like, where do we move the needle that we're pointing to, kind of rolling back progress?
right,
Sure, you can increase enrollment rates in four-year colleges across the country, but what colleges, right?
right.
We see a lot of, we were disproportionately caught up in for-profit colleges, or ones with low graduation rates, or
Hmm.
ones that don't really improve your career prospects afterwards. But you
Hmm.
get these nice stats of like, we're increasing 4-year
Hmm.
degrees.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, the wealth gap grew
Right.
over a period of time. So I'm like, well, what progress were we making that this would potentially be rolling back?
Hmm.
One, and then yeah, two, it's like, it's for me, the policy is what follows from a mental model of folks that have a specific purpose and have
Hmm.
the power and independence to achieve that purpose.
Hmm.
And within that, if they have both of those things, there's creativity, right?
Hmm.
So post 1965, there weren't a ton of like, this thing is only for white people policies left on paper. But there was a lot of creativity in terms of how do we advantage one group and disadvantage another without having race show up in the, property liens and the property leases anymore,
Right.
um, or within any policies for housing, for employment, for anything else. And so
Or
you can get
redrawing the
creative.
voting lines, right?
Right, exactly. Another great example. So you can get creative in a way that solves for equity as well
Mhm.
without, you don't have to, it feels like almost it's the laziest version almost of like, well, if we can't see that this person is black and then, use that to make a specific decision, then there's no
Mhm.
way we can help them. Like, well, there's tons of ways. And again, you
Mhm.
found these ways over time successfully to advantage other
Consistently.
groups over. Yeah.
Just recently, President Biden found 3 billion ways to help Israel annually. And I do believe in reparations. I do believe that if you knowingly
Mhm.
took a land from someone, that you owe them more than just notifying everyone on the bottom of your email that your company sits on their land. Like I need to see some. I like Jedi more than DEIB, right? I need to see justice built into
Yes.
my. All right. Thank you
Yes.
for the acknowledgement. What are you doing for the people that you knowingly are sitting on their land making
Right.
billions a year? Like, I
Where
mean,
is the repair? Is the key root word of reparations. Like that's included in justice. That's missing.
mm,
Yeah.
how
Where's
do
the
we
repair?
heal? Because the justice and the reparation is a part of healing.
Right.
And if there is no actual social or demonstrated healing and I don't believe your corporation should exist to carry this out, but it's
Right.
so simple these days. I mean, you talked about laziness and it's so simple for you to say, you know what percentage of our supply of our like contractor supply line comes from people of color or African Americans? I'd like to make sure that we have
Mhm.
at least 25 to 50% of a diversified expenditure going to people of color, women owned businesses, people who are federally rated as right. Like there's a way for you to put that process in play and to
Yeah.
be committed to that. And if you're a company, luckily to be a company at the size of Google, that's not a small number. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a huge bit of impact in just
Yeah.
one little decision.
Yeah. That's where like a lot of it. Like I said, across the space, across society, is more of a will than a skill issue. Like
More
we
than
have
a
the
will than
ability
a
to
skill.
have this conversation via a video application. I don't really know what it means in this super thin device that's just
Right.
we can create these things, but you're telling me you can't figure out a way to treat people equitably.
Mm,
That doesn't make sense. Like you definitely can figure out a way. And we've, again, to your point, it's not like we've been neutral on the matter for the
mm,
last 1,000 years.
mm.
It's been very much a one directional, like global colonization, based on race um, thing. So it's like you know how to do it
Hmm.
uh, in a certain direction. Now we're just asking you to even it out again, to repair it, to make it
Yeah.
right. But yeah, I feel that's where I'm like I want to push people to not pretend that
Have an
we
answer.
we have no experience in this space of
What I don't
race.
know what to do.
Tons
I
of
mean,
experience in race. Yeah.
how do you
Mm-hmm.
measure equitable impact in people?
Mm.
How do you start to think about your job and far as equity and the measurement of performance, right? Like is it
Yeah.
can you give some insight to that without sharing anything?
Yeah, no, it's pretty simple to me. It's equity is everyone has what they need to perform their best in
Mm,
performance management. I think outside of that is very similar. Equity is everyone has what they need to live up to their full potential in life.
wow.
Um,
Okay.
and so that equity and inclusion and belonging are what allows diversity, us to get the value proposition of diversity.
Mm,
For a nation like the United States that is diverse, um, how do we actually tap into that? I think it's not, again, this inequality is not just bad or inequity is not just bad for the folks that are disadvantaged by it. It's reducing the total
yes.
benefit to companies, to the nation, et cetera. And so, because again, you don't have, if you had a team of sports players and not everyone was performing to their highest ability, your team is underperforming by definition. So I think our country is underperforming. I think our companies are underperforming because not everyone there has what they need to perform their best. And so, or to live up to their full potential. And so why have diversity if you're not going to make the most of it, right? So you need, that's why you can't separate these things and just say, well, I'm going to
Mm,
hire people that from XYZ background, or at a school, I'm going to admit people from XYZ background. Okay, and
yeah.
what do you do with them when they're there? What do you
Mm,
bring out of them when they're there? Do they feel a sense of belonging enough to grow? Are they getting the types of support that they need? Not that works for other folks,
right.
that requires a recognition that they might have different needs. Um, and yeah, on the flip side of it too, part of equity is the fact that some folks that are being advantaged in it, that needs to be reconsidered as well. I think we're more comfortable always addressing the folks that have been disadvantaged, but
Mm,
there's a huge issue to your point around legacy admissions and the conversation there around
hmm.
other folks that have been, if you made it completely meritocratic, wouldn't have some of the same opportunities. So just how do you
True.
even it out across the board? Because again, that's not good for the university either. So you're letting in folks that were otherwise not qualified to be there based on some other criteria, right? So
Mhm.
I know obviously those are benefits to the university, maybe financially and things like that by supporting that donor base and that alumni base. But in terms of an educational institution, um, you're not doing yourself any favors by, lowering the bar for people that are advantaged, right? And
Absolutely.
same at the companies. You have to look at the inequity in hiring decisions you make
Hmm.
based on long history of referrals, long history of, like you said, sticking to very specific schools where you're
Hmm.
giving folks the
Hmm.
benefit of the doubt and opportunities who may not be the most qualified folks.
Yep.
Um, and that's obviously even thinking outside of the everyday biases that go into managing someone, evaluating someone's performance, promoting them, etc. It's like, we try to pride ourselves in being a meritocracy.
Hmm.
And again, if you really wanted to live up to that, you'd have to do it in both of those directions, right? Like,
That's a great point.
yeah.
Actually, that's an awesome point because what you're seeing as a ripple effect of the Supreme Court decision are universities that are challenging the legacy at their own schools, that are removing the legacy, that would gloat about their legacy system because it is connected to the donor base. It is connected to a financial engine.
Um, I'm a humanist in terms of, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with people
Hmm.
fundamentally.
Hmm.
There's no way, if we look at ourselves as just a member of the animal kingdom, that, like, none of these animals we look at and say you have an inherent flaw in
Hmm.
what's wrong with the eagle, like,
Hmm.
do they not know how to live their lives well? Do
Hmm.
bears not know? Do fish not know how to live their lives well? We all do, based on evolution. It's just we are in an environment that we created that's not suited to how we're supposed to be living our lives. And so I just want to call that disconnect and try to move away from, the foundation that there's something inherently wrong with people, whether that's greed, power, or whatever. We are the way we are because we were evolved to thrive and survive in certain environments. We've done an incredible job at that.
Yep.
And it just something got away from us again in the past 10,000 years, which, evolution hasn't had a chance to catch up to yet because it moves a lot slower than that, where it seems like we're just out of place. But these are natural reactions to our environment. The,
I fully agree. I mean, that's even deeper than I was ready to take it. I fully agree with you. Just moving it towards just where we are as the modern human, we have created an environment. I would argue even less because of the form of capitalism, and I'll start from the Baron
mm,
Robin era of the 1800s and the
mm,
development of the industrialization of people and work.
yeah, yeah,
Once we started getting people into the Henry Ford mechanical model of you need a manager and managers manage this,
mm,
it was the era of the abuse of capitalism. There's
yeah,
nothing wrong with power. As
yes.
I fully agree with what you said, the human being is not inherently
Layer
wrong.
on a ton of
You
AI.
being
And I'm supportive of that in ways because, to your point about the Industrial Revolution, I feel like a lot of where the misdirection has been trying to turn us into something that's not human, whether that's a
hmm,
physical machine at first in terms of like a
that's
factory,
literally what
or,
it
or
was.
to now like even in the information systems, information jobs, white collar jobs, you're turning into a machine in terms of like doing artificial intelligence tasks more or less, right? So if my the thing I'm doing can be replaced by a robot, I want it to be replaced by a robot. because that means I'm doing something that's not like purely human. I only want to be doing the things that only a person can do. I
I,
don't want
I would
to.
say then your responsibility as the leader should be to find a higher order responsibility,
Exactly.
and you should be executing at something else as a higher priority then.
That's how we get the most out of folks, right? So if
That's what
you're
human beings should be
doing,
doing. Yeah.
spending tons of time putting together slides, and a robot can do that, let the robot do that. I will give you something more important to do, you know?
Hmm.
So
So you,
I
so, so
try to
you,
think of it
so
that way.
can I encapsulate that answer? So in response, you don't think that work will diminish. You think that we will just shift human beings to different work within companies.
I think we have the opportunity to do that. Will we
Ah,
do it? I don't know.
I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. I hear you loud and
Yeah,
clear.
but you have the opportunity. So that's where it's like not inherently negative. It's what we do with it.
Mm,
AI. And again, I just want to caution. I don't think a lot of it is there yet, right? It's like,
mhm.
it's good at doing very specific tasks. Um, but even right now, there's trust issues around how we're using these large language models for things
Mhm.
that maybe they weren't meant to be used for.
Right.
If they're essentially just predicting what comes next in a string of text, that's very different than like the idea of general artificial intelligence of like this
Absolutely.
thing has some knowledge on this topic and it can.
Hmm.
um, so it feels like that, and that's the magic of it, right? When it spits back a response, it could feel like it actually knows about this topic, but it doesn't.
Hmm.
So just want to be careful about like we're not there yet.
Hmm.
um, Obviously it's still wild, like the things that it can do
Hmm.
even at this level of advancement. So I can only imagine, as it gets more and more powerful.
Well, can I add a caveat? We're not there in the public yet.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like quantum computers. I don't know what they're doing somewhere,
Yeah.
but they're doing stuff. Yeah,
Quantum computing in North Korea,
yeah, yeah,
quantum computing in mainland Hong Kong,
yeah, yeah.
we're still mostly having this conversation about the people who are comfortable sharing publicly
That's true.
what
That's
they're
true.
working on. The spaces where we have zero control, where they don't even follow our mandates or laws, should
Yeah,
scare people.
it is, and that's even what's come to the last year with the kind of AI race, even amongst tech companies. A lot of it was about, it wasn't about who had the technology, it was about the responsibility of when to release it.
Right. It took, so I have some personal insight into what's been happening
Mhm.
in a few different places.
Wow.
it it's not like if you're in tech right now, it's a
Yeah.
scary place. Like you're like 30,000 people at just one
Yeah.
company, and that's not including the rest of the industry. What we can do with large like LLMs is
Yeah.
significant enough now that you don't need 20 different copy editors. You don't need
Mhm.
20 social media managers. You don't, I
Yeah.
mean, I I need one account manager, and then I need that account
Yeah.
manager to have one person that knows how to write prompts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and that's
so,
a great point. I didn't mean to diminish the impact it's currently having, and that even large language models, that doesn't encapsulate everything with AI out there. There's a ton
not at
more
all.
that is doing and can do. The image recognition stuff, obviously the
The
image
cloning,
creation, video
yeah,
creation
that's
stuff.
scary.
Yeah, I mean the self-driving aspect. You talk about job displacement. Trucking being one of the main sources of employment for a lot of the country. And what does it mean if a machine can do it better with no sleep, less accidents,
Yeah,
faster, cheaper?
that was a great point. Yeah,
Yeah, so all these things are coming for sure. And like I said, I think we could find more productive things for people to do than sit
good.
behind the wheel and
Yeah,
hold in their urination or pee in a bottle
yeah.
and stop for 10 minutes because they don't get paid for stops and eat some junk food. I think we can think of something more productive for those people to do. Will we? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
you're right. I think the future, I've said this before, the future of work, and if I could wave my magic wand and I was in charge of setting the agenda, the future of work is a universal pay, so that you have the ability to meet minimal standards. It's not going to
Mhm.
be much, but it's going to be, you can afford a general apartment, and
Yeah.
some food.
Yeah.
And then you need to create or you need to work. And after that, I think putting people in a position where they have a ground zero to create from, and then having programs align that will either give them the technical skills to do, move into a new field or move into a new, bit of work. We need to leverage those as a part of our government assistance and our government funding, um,
Yeah.
to create more creators. And
Yeah.
then jobs like sit in a truck and drive on a road go away. But the people who do those jobs and carry out those jobs will be affected by this first
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
hardest, because I
Yeah.
don't believe anyone's going to shift for that group. And many of them, unfortunately, are veterans. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
when you get out of the army, the number one thing most army graduates get out with is, a couple certifications in truck driving, because
Mm.
you have to move. My cousins in the army. I have, family. I love
Wow.
the veterans, but if you don't specialize in something tech related, sonar, if you went to the Navy or something like that, you get out, the job, I mean, the skills that you have are military training, and that's very, role specific security, or
Yeah.
you have a bunch of certifications and licenses and managing big vehicles.
Wow.
So yeah, most people
Yeah.
don't connect the two, but
Right. I never thought of that either. I think what you were saying about, the entirely different way of living in relation to work that might come with something like a universal basic income being more widespread, implemented in different ways. It doesn't have to be the exact things we've been piloting, but just that idea of like, does everyone need to work just to live or
to
not? Like,
live,
yeah, just to survive. Like, I think we're at a point in society where we have the resources, we have the ability where folks actually shouldn't have to work a job just to live as a person, like to feed themselves, to
mhm.
have clothing, shelter, etc.
Yeah. All right. So
Um,
I don't want to take up your whole time, but what are you caught up in right now? Like what really like gets your passion going? Like, what are you working on right now that you're excited about?
it's a nice pivot. Yeah, I mean, outside of trying to make Google more equitable, I've been building a publishing company for the past 1.5
Okay.
years. Yeah, focused on creators of color, folks from marginalized backgrounds that don't often view themselves as authors or whose stories rarely get told, or if they do, they get kind of watered down and edited out for mass marketing. And to really, if you think about documenting human history, right, make sure that it's actually documentation of the full breadth of the variety, the beauty, the diversity of our world and the stories and everything we've been through.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it hit me. It's obviously for a while, but I read a lot, in a business school, and I like articles on management and business, all this stuff. And if you look around who's writing on these things, whose thoughts and opinions are we constantly flooded with, and who are we not? Um, I'm like, there's nobody has anything else to say about management than white men.
Hmm.
Nobody. Like, I can't get a book from a Asian woman, a black woman, somebody, like
Hmm.
somebody, any other voice, a
Hmm.
Latinx man writing a book on strategy, like everything I consume has to come from this, one group's perspective on it.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so it's like, that can't be it, right? There's got to be more out
Hmm.
there, not just about that topic, about all topics. So yeah, I've been building that for a year and a half. I have 3 books that are coming out this year, all the
Nice.
first time authors.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and it's a variety of stuff. It's cookbook, poetry,
Yeah.
a dope like dramatized fiction book that's about manhood, and yeah, but they're all buying for creators of color. So that's been my side passion. That's been something I poured a lot into.
Okay.
It's kind of
So
a creative outlet. Yeah.
can anyone like any person of color, just individual, they have an idea, or maybe they just want to work with you as a publisher, they can just reach out and kind of get in touch,
Yeah.
or
it's still selective, so it's still application process,
Yeah,
but
that's what
it's
I
more
figured.
accessible, right? You don't need a literary agent.
Hmm.
You don't need a finished manuscript. I mean, it helps, but we have folks again that are starting from blank page, right?
Hmm.
They just have an idea, they have an audience, they have an impact they want to have in an audience. And the application and vetting process is about, is this someone that we think can have that impact on the audience, and is us helping them write this book, will that help
Hmm.
us have that impact together? So yeah, anyone can do it. www.lastgenpublishing.com.
Say it again. What is it?
lastgenpublishing.com.
Lastgenpublishing.com. Okay,
Yeah.
great. I just want to make sure we have it recorded. I'll make sure to put a link in anything we do with the
Oh, dope.
episode.
Yeah,
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely. Of course. No, I